we take a closer look at Christian nationalism and how it's affecting politics and civil rights in the United States. I get that there are competing interpretations and ideas about what it means to be Christian, about what the good news is, about the New Testament, about Jesus. I get all of that.
Right.
But I can't imagine any iteration that makes sense and corresponds to Trump. And yet evangelicals tied themselves to Trump. If you're an evangelical of any sort, whether you're, even if you thought of it as a left-wing ideology, if you thought of it as a right-wing ideology, if you were a quote-unquote Bible thumper, if you were, you know what I mean, if you were a literalist, if you, I mean, there's no version of this thing that makes sense with Trump's presidency, his identity, his character, his history, his state.
Yeah.
Why do these people pick Trump? Somebody please help me understand it.
I'd love to take
Please,
that one.
go.
So you're right. Some evangelicals will define themselves as as a group defined by their theology. And they'll talk about things like a born-again experience and the authority of the scriptures and the centrality of the cross of Christ, right? This is how they will define themselves, at least their leaders will. As a cultural historian, when I was looking at the history, I saw that didn't really hold together. It doesn't make sense because the vast majority of Black Protestants in this country, for example, could check off all of those boxes.
Yeah.
And they do not identify as evangelical because it's very clear.
And evangelicals don't identify them as them either, right?
Most do not, right? Some will claim them, but not actually, you know, they won't be in the same churches together or in the same organizations in many cases. And so I see evangelicalism largely as a cultural movement and a system of networks and alliances. So if you want to understand evangelicalism today, you have to look at their organizations, at Christian publishing, at these massive industries. It's a consumer culture, Christian radio. And so it shares a quote-unquote Christian worldview. And far and wide through this popular culture and through membership in these organizations. And that membership is police, right? There are gatekeepers here. And it's those organizations that then unite with political organizations. Now, the story of how do we get from this understanding of evangelicalism to support of Donald Trump, that's where we have to bring in the politics and the power. Because within these communities, they have for half a century now cultivated this understanding that they are under threat, that they have to fight to restore Christian America and that the liberals are against them. Everybody is. So they need power. They need power in order to restore Christian America. And Trump came in and he was the right guy for the job precisely because he was not constrained by traditional Christian virtue. And he told them he would fight to protect Christianity. And they actually called him their ultimate fighting champion. He was their warrior and he would be ruthless on their behalf to preserve their supremacy.
Exactly. And supremacy is the right word here because there's one more thing to add. He was for white people, period. And so this is the thing that I get at in my book is that I want people to understand that evangelicals have always had problems about race.
You say racism is a feature,
not a bug. It's a feature of this. And, you know, there's one kind of history that we talk about in evangelicalism that's great. Abolitionism, you know, trying to get the vote, suffrage, all of these things, right? Even helping with the civil rights movement, right? But there's another history about evangelicalism, separating because it's wanting to have slaves, Southern Baptists, KKK. Who starts the KKK? A pastor, all right? You know, we have, who are we fighting against? King, because they are evil, because they are trying to usurp the status quo. You can see how this goes, right? So by the time you get to Trump, right, what have you just had before Trump? A Black president, Barack Hussein Obama, who can't possibly be from America, who is, you know, a usurper, who is why the Tea Party movement happened, and then you get Donald Trump. And all of these people who are evangelicals in 2016, you have a rise in people who vote for Donald Trump in 2020. But what studies have found, one in particular, I'm forgetting the name, that they said more people called themselves evangelical because of what happened in 2016. It's not because they thought they believed in this particular kind of Christianity. It's because they believed that evangelicalism meant white to them. And that is the core of all of this. Whiteness is embedded in American evangelicalism. You could have black evangelicals, you could have Latino evangelicals, but white evangelicals are the sine qua non of everything. They are it. And so as a voting bloc, they're the people that they go for. And let me say this very clearly, because this is the way you need to understand why evangelicals like Donald Trump. Donald Trump delivered. Donald Trump delivered Supreme Court justices, over 200 justices. Donald Trump delivered for them. He was their deliverer and provided.
Now, when we say delivered
deliverance.
Supreme Court justices, we're talking about justices who would overturn Roe v. Wade.
That's right.
Okay.
And which was the thing that they have been fighting for a very long time. And so he got those justices. He got those justices for them. He lined up everything for them. So why wouldn't they go to the Capitol and fight for him? Why wouldn't they go to the ballot box and fight for him? Why wouldn't they believe that the election was a lie? Because Donald Trump was ordained by God to be in that particular position. And so that's what evangelicals think right now, who are for Donald Trump.
Kristen, in your book, Jesus and John Wayne, you write that evangelical support for former President Donald Trump is the culmination of evangelicals' embrace of militant masculinity and the callous display of power at home and abroad. Those are ideas that seem, again, to be at odds with some of their fundamental faith claims, fundamental beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, they did seem to be. When I first started this research, which was almost 20 years ago now, actually, I was looking at popular evangelical books on masculinity and how to be a Christian man. And this is a huge market, right? These books, some of them are selling in the millions. So a vast market, and men are studying these in churches and in small groups. What does it mean to be a Christian man? Well, I read some of these and I was surprised because there weren't a whole lot of Bible verses in these books. Instead, they looked to Hollywood heroes. They looked to Mel Gibson's William Wallace from the movie Braveheart, right? That's their favorite. They looked to cowboys and warriors and soldiers and John Wayne, right? And this was
not like Jesus.
Not Jesus, right? But then what they ended up doing is they transformed Jesus. They transformed the Jesus of the Gospels into this warrior Christ. Now, you can find some passages in Revelation to work with and to build on. And then they make Jesus into this like man on it with big muscles, tattoos down his leg, charging into battle, wielding a bloody sword to slay his enemies. So when they're talking about following Christ, right, that's the Christ that they're holding up, not the Christ who says, love your enemies, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek, and put that sword away. And so there's theological work actually being done to transform historic Christian teachings in the service of their own quest for power.
Well, I think probably the question isn't, how are they doing it? The question is they're doing it, and they don't really care about that history. Thomas Jefferson.
But is this disingenuous, though? I mean,
it is disingenuous. It's absolutely disingenuous because, as many people know around this table, there's lots of tomes that have been written about history from a very strange perspective, i.e. David Barton, who writes these histories that are not real histories about America and American religion, right? And so when Thomas Jefferson is writing to the church in Danbury, Connecticut, and saying, there should be this wall, we're not doing this, right? They don't care that Thomas Jefferson had a Quran. They don't care that Thomas Jefferson had a Quran. They don't care that that Quran is sitting right down the street in D.C. at the Smithsonian. What they care about is that God made this a special nation. And so when you talk about this nation being special, those documents here, you can read them how you want to read them because you don't read the same history that Kristen is teaching in her history class or I'm teaching in an American religion class. They're not reading that stuff. They are reading these kinds of made-up tomes. This is a nostalgia movement. And we have to think about Christian nationalism as nostalgia. Nostalgia for a time that never existed. nostalgia for a time that didn't exist at the beginning of this nation. Why did people come here? They came here to escape, tyrannical religion in England. They wanted to have religious freedom to do what they wanted to do. They were religious people. And now we see this being used as, no, we need to have a state religion, just like England. This is crazy, right? Because you're doing exactly the thing that our founders and framers went to battle for. And so I think what we have to really understand about people who are embracing Christian nationalism right now is that they may not get all the nuances around this table, right? They just hear this as another phrase in a whole line of phrases like make America great again, American exceptionalism, the greatness of America that have been spewed out from different kinds of people throughout our history.